Thanks an absolute bunch for coming back to Most Amazing Top 10. My name is Danny Burke, and today guys we're going to be talking about game consoles. Now over the years people have loved them, they've lost them, they've broke them, they've bashed them, they've scratched them, and formed some amazing gaming memories along the way. But which one of them sold the most in the whole world? Is your favourite on here? Let's find out as we dive into the top 10 best-selling game consoles of all time. Starting things off at number 10, we have the NES. The Nintendo Entertainment System was released way back in 1983 and was the best-selling console of its time and the best-selling Nintendo console until the release of the Wii. It's famous for bringing Mario into people's front living rooms, and Super Mario 3 was its best-selling game. It went on sale in the US for about $199.99, which is about $440 by today's standards. Now without the NES being such a success outside of Japan, there's a good chance that all the characters you see behind me right now would have stayed in Japan forever. So if you like any of those, say thank you to the NES. Coming in number 9 now, we have the PSP. The PlayStation Portable was Sony's first handheld gaming console when they released it in 2004, and it sold 80.2 million units in its lifetime. It wowed gamers back then with its ability to not only play games like the rival Nintendo DS, but also play music and videos and store pictures. There were over 700 games released for it, but its most popular title was Capcom's Monster Hunter Portable 3rd. Weird name. When it was first released in America, Sony actually paid graffiti artists to tag PSP art in 7 different major cities to help promote it. Yes, they were given a cease and desist order by the police. That's right, Sony got done for graffiti. Next up at number 8 now, we've got the Game Boy Advance. It sold 81.51 million copies during its lifetime and had no real competition back when it was released in 2001. It simply dominated at that time. Its best-selling games were Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, and it was the successor to the previous Game Boy and Game Boy Color consoles. Now one interesting thing to mention is that Nintendo were actually working on the Game Boy Advance as far back as 1995, but it wasn't ready to release for 6 more years. And so to make sure that nobody forgot about the whole Game Boy series and got bored of it, they released the Game Boy Color. The Game Boy Advance was codenamed Project Atlantis, which sounds like it could have been a pretty decent game for that console. At number 7 now, we have the Xbox 360. It did a lot better than the original Xbox did and ended up selling 85.49 million copies over the years it was active. It was first released in November 2005 and was still in production until April 2016. Edge magazine puts the console's success down to having its own social network, cross-game chat, new indie games every single week, as well as having some great game exclusives such as Halo. There are also plenty of add-ons such as the Motion Sensing Kinect that help boost sales along the way. The Xbox 360 was not without its fair share of problems though. Anyone who owned one will remember the notorious red ring of death. As the ring slowly filled up, your Xbox dreams began to die. Next up guys, it seems only fitting that we have the 360's biggest rival that just outsold it at number 6, the PlayStation 3. It sold 86.46 million copies, just a million more than the Xbox 360, with which it had a huge rivalry with over the years. Its most popular game of all time was Grand Theft Auto 5. It was also quite an expensive console when it came out. It was set at $499 for the 20GB model or $599 for the 60GB. But that didn't seem to put people off who were quite enticed by the PS3's powerful processing power. The US Air Force once famously built a supercomputer out of 1,760 PS3s. It was also the first PlayStation to include the wireless DualShock controller. It functioned well as a home entertainment system with both Blu-ray and DVD support, as well as having 2 different versions that followed it, the Slim and the Super Slim. Yeah, I think eventually Sony realised they need to stop just slimming and chopping down the PS3 and get to work on the PS4. Coming in number 5 now, we have the Nintendo Wii. It's the first on our list to break the 100 million sales mark, coming in at a whopping 101.18 million units sold worldwide. The Wii's success was in how broadly it appealed across demographics. It wasn't enjoyed by just the young or the old, the casual or the hardcore. It had something for everyone. It also succeeded by providing gamers with a real, fresh experience in motion sensing gaming. Game designer Will Wright once said the PS3 and the Xbox 360 feel like better versions of the last, but the Wii feels like a major jump. And the results speak for themselves. Coupled with new versions of Nintendo's classics, the Wii was at one point the fastest selling console of all time. Its most popular games were Wii Sports, Wii Play and Mario Kart Wii, which helped promote its iconic remote and nunchuck controllers. Moving on to number 4 now, it's the PlayStation. The first one, yes. I don't even think Sony knew what this would lead into when they released it back in 1994. It was originally kind of an accident that it even existed. Sony were actually helping to develop a new type of SNES console with Nintendo, but when that fell through, they started working on their own, and that's the one we know today. The PS1 was surprisingly cheap at its release, coming in at just $299. Atari tried to actually stop them from doing this because they said it was putting American competitors out of business, but the PS1's quality spoke for itself. Games like Metal Gear Solid, Final Fantasy VII, Gran Turismo, Resident Evil and Crash Bandicoot, what a game, are just some of the titles that catapulted Sony to the front of the games market. For some gaming historians, the PS1's success was all down to the games. Alright, sitting at the number 3 spot now, we have the Game Boy. No Advance. Now between the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color, this handheld sold 118.69 million copies. The original version was released in 1989 and cost just $97. It had competition from the likes of Sega's Game Gear, but key features about the Game Boy helped it win over the public. Its simple, bland design was a bit deceptive of what really lay below. It had a 30-hour battery life that raised a lot of eyebrows. It also had a rudimentary but pretty successful multiplayer system using cables, and it already had the whole Nintendo back catalogue of games to release from. And then it got smacked with a rainbow when they released the Game Boy Color, which also had faster hardware as well. Between the two of them, they absolutely dominated the 90s handheld market and helped pave the way for Nintendo's future handhelds, such as our number 2, the Nintendo DS. Released in 2004, the DS sold 154.88 million copies over its lifetime. It was the successor to the Game Boy Advance, and the DS actually has two meanings in that name. It means developer's system and dual screen. Now at the time, the foldable second screen really kind of stood out compared to everything else on the market, but it wasn't really anything new for Nintendo. Many people drew comparisons between the DS and Nintendo's first ever handheld console from 1980, the Game & Watch. The DS managed to retain a lot of young Game Boy fans while also attracting older demographics through clever marketing and the release of games like Brain Training to help improve memory and brain functioning. And if you guys can see the outtakes of this, I probably need that. And the DS is also the best selling handheld of all time because our number 1 spot goes to the PlayStation 2 with 155 million sales worldwide. It's pretty hard to really get your head around just how dominant the PlayStation 2 was back in its heyday. Its main rivals were Nintendo's GameCube, Sega's Dreamcast and of course Microsoft's Xbox, and it outsold all of them combined. Yeah, and then add about 45 million more on top of that. It's crazy. It was released in March 2000 and initially it got an okay reception from people, but not really the one you'd expect as the successor of the legendary PS1. Soon though, things changed as games like Gran Turismo 3 came out, Metal Gear Solid 2 and then Grand Theft Auto 3 sealed the deal, pretty much. The sheer variety and richness of the games over the years had some people calling it a golden era. In the end, it did age gracefully and bowed out to a new era of consoles, and production was finally discontinued at the end of 2012. Well guys, the PS2 was my absolute favourite console of all time, so I'm glad it made it to the top of that list, but which one of these was your favourite, or did your favourite not make the top 10? Sorry about that. Leave all your nostalgia in the comment section below. Thanks as ever for watching Most Amazing Top 10. My name's Danny Burke and I'll see all you guys in the next one.